Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the XR Sales Director Incubator. My name is Mike Dixon. I lead the Sales Marketing Division of XR Recruitment and Search, and over 20 years as a professional recruiter, my biggest frustration is seeing someone's career slow down before they reach their potential. Too many career conversations are unproductive, and career decisions are narrowing rather than expanding a career. In the Sales Director Incubator, we're going to explore why this happens and help future and current leaders such as you guys to prepare for better career conversations and to make better career decisions. In each session, we're going to learn about a different sales director's journey, how they've gained experiences and skills to reach senior leadership. We'll look at their successes, failures, and lessons learned. Today is the first session in season 2, and I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Burgon, Sales Director for Frucor Suntory. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Thank you, Mike, for having me.
That's all right. Just to give you a brief intro, Chris, you started your career in retail, which we'll explore, before moving into FMCG sales with dairy farmers back in the day, and then progressed throughout a number of roles in Unilever. And for the past 13 years or so, you've worked with Frucor across customer management, channel management, field sales leadership, and working on brands as well. You've led P&C, grocery, impulse and route channels, and have recently returned to Australia after 4 years in New Zealand to lead the sales team here. So that's a bit on Chris's background. Now, those of you who've been put on the call before, you'll know that you're muted, but we do encourage conversation through the chat facility. So please jump on, guys, and ask any questions you want, and we'll do our best to answer them either as we go or if relevant, or towards the end of the session. We'll have time to do that. We've got an hour, so we'll be done by 9. But let's get into it, Chris. Let's do this. So look, I love the bio you provided, and we ask every sales director to give a bit of background into themselves, not just in terms of their working career, but their personal life as well. And Chris talked, I thought, very interesting about everything that was important to you. Your career you described as how you make a living, but your real job, which you split into rocks, being your daughter Sienna and your wife Kylie, and then your pebbles, which are all the passions that are important to you. So golf, which I'm with you on, food and travel, and I noticed was in there was James Bond. So yeah, what was that about?
I think there's something about that whole espionage and spy element that's quite cool, and he gets to drive some pretty cool cars. He dresses pretty well, and he does some cool stuff around the world. And you think about that, and you go, "Wow, that's quite an experience to do those type of things."
Yeah, we'd all love a bit of that, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay, let's get into your career journey. As I mentioned before, you started in retail. You worked at Macca's, Deli France, and Leonard's. Before you joined Dairy Farmers as an area sales manager. How did the move into FMCG sales happen for you, and did you find the retail experience useful at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. It was it's an environment that I was in growing up. 14 and 9 months, my first job at McDonald's, and I just love the whole franchising element of taking a system and being able to replicate it across the suburbs, across the states, across the country. And I really enjoyed the customer interaction side. So the type of service and quality of service and product we could provide, and the interaction with the community. So then coming into that environment, I'm like, okay, what does a career really look like? I had no idea. So I went to a couple of different businesses, so into Leonard's, into Deli France, and then I got to a point and I said, look, for the next 40 years, do I really want to be working in these four walls? And I remember one day I was in a store and I was opposite a McDonald's, and I remember just watching people move in and out of McDonald's and then going over to a Woolworths, and I saw this rep, and this rep I think was working for it might have been SPC at the time, SPC shirts, and I'm like, repping, that'd be quite interesting. Your own company car, out and about, spending time in the market. So I thought to myself, well, maybe it's the time to get out of doing what I'm doing and go and try something else. So in 1998, the milk industry deregulated, and they were looking for individuals who had franchising experience. Okay. And it was ultimately to look after the milkos. The milkos were becoming a converted franchise as such. So I applied for the job. It was in the paper at the time. So just think back to 1998. It was in the paper, this area sales manager for dairy farmers. So I turned up as this franchising guy who knew absolutely nothing about FMCG. The only thing I knew about milk and cheese was when I bought it from the supermarket. I just had no idea how it operated. So I landed the job and set out on my way in FMCG. And, 22 years later, I've not looked back really.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess, well, you got a car, so it's one sort of James Bond thing.
It might have been some type of Ford Falcon at the time. It was no Aston Martin.
Not as glamorous as with Aston Martin. That's brilliant. And you've made FMCG your home now for the past 22 years. And after Dairy Farmers, you spent, 6 years at Unilever, and you say you've been at Frucor since, 2006. Do you think FMCG sales has changed much during your time?
Yeah, definitely. If I go back, relationships were actually really pivotal. They were the centerpiece of your connections, your ability to be able to do a transaction, I'll call it, with people was all about that relationship-driven environment. What we're seeing now, and I think it's fair across all the various companies, is sophistication is increasing. So data is king. The technology is driving greater insights, it's driving greater predictability, but it's also a bit of a double-edged sword because we've got so much data now. We continue to keep drilling and drilling and drilling. The secret in all this is not to get in all the weeds, but to be able to find that place where you're moving from insight to action. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges, is how we move quick enough with insight to action. So that was part A, really sophistication and technology. The second one is relationships. Because of all the data and insights, the commercial performance is being scrutinised so much more now. And it's fair to say that the retailers are far more savvy, and the relationship conversations are sort of moving from that, g'day, how you doing? Let's have a coffee, let's have a beer, how's life? To actually being very pointed, being very clear around profit delivery, being very clear around performance. So I think over time, the relationships have actually become more transactional because of the role of data and technology.
I'd agree. I think as somebody who meets obviously a lot of sales leaders and future leaders, I think the roles evolved a lot, which you discussed through this program, and I think the range of skills you need to be effective in FMCG sales now is far more broad. It's not about that personality and ego anymore. It's a I guess first up skill, you look about how strong is someone's analytical capability, which is interesting, but a definite change. But thinking about the way into FMCG, I think we've seen over the years too the decrease in the number of direct sales teams. Fewer grad programs, or smaller grad programs than there used to be. Do you think that's going to create a talent shortage, or of those changes in terms of the pathways? Is that about right? Is that just about the balance writing itself?
It's a good question. I think there's no doubt that direct selling is on a decrease by nature of tech. So the ability now to do B2B online technology is playing a bigger part. But actually what we're seeing is refreshingly, we're seeing actually a talent increase. So the capability of individuals that are joining our organisation is actually of a far higher quality. So they're smarter, they're more analytical, they're more action orientated, and more solution driven. So they're actually bringing more of the package to the game, and that's been really, really encouraging for us to be able to see that level of capability increase, and then their ability to be able to influence and impact the business quickly is pretty clear to be seen. So a bit on the contrary, Mike, actually, we're seeing a fantastic range of young individuals coming through.
Yeah, brilliant. Which I think is awesome to see. So I think one of the flip side of that is how well are we doing in terms of retaining talent as well, because one of my goals in terms of my role as an experienced recruiter in this space is not just about spreading the message on how FMCG and sales in particular can create really exciting career paths. It's about when you're in that, how do we retain talent? How do we stop people leaving the sector? And one of the things that I often get requests on when people kind of reach sticking points is I'm not sure FMCG is for me anymore. I'm quite interested in tech or sports or B2B or something else. And And look, and I really encourage career broadening, Chris. It's one of the big things that I talk about through this program, and I'm really, encouraging people who are thinking more broadly about their career. But if you go back to the root cause, often of the reason for that conversation is because their career is stalling, and the reason often it's stalling is because they've got to that point in a linear fashion, haven't done enough broadening roles. So for someone who has kept within the sector and is now a sales director, what's kept you in FMCG sales for so long?
I actually view a career like a chessboard. You move forward, you move sideways, and sometimes, depending on what type of experience you're looking to achieve, you might go backwards. So I've had a couple of times that I've chosen to go backwards and come off leadership groups in a bid to actually go and get a greater experience base.
Yeah.
So look, I think it's different for every individual and how they choose to actually navigate their career. I'm actually a big believer that you own your career. The organisation doesn't own your career. Your line manager doesn't own your career. HR doesn't own your career. You do. So you need to be able to navigate and set the tone and set the vision. Look, I've been able to ride the good and the bad of roles by putting myself in the line of fire, I'll call it. And I've done that very, very purposely to build my backpack of skills and capabilities. And I'm a big believer that you've got to live the role. You've got to be able to go through the good and the bad. You've got to be able to write the plan. You've got to be able to execute the plan. You've got to be able to understand what's worked and what hasn't. Careers, personally, I don't believe at all they're a straight trajectory. I think people are sort of living in a dream if you think you just start a career and you're going to go straight up and you end up in senior leadership roles after 5-10 years. It just doesn't work that way. I use a simple model where I lead for strategy, culture, and performance. And if you think about those three elements, it really encapsulates all the time horizons that we need to operate in, which is the short, medium, and long term. And it encompasses both tactical and strategic focus areas as well. So my key message there is, we're probably going to work circa 40 years in our careers. That's 40 years to build on capability. It's 40 years to grow. It's 40 years to manage the chessboard.
Yeah. That's interesting. I love that chessboard kind of philosophy. And I think when I reflect back on the interviews we've done through this series, nobody's career path is the same. Everybody who's reached that sales director role, who has ambitions to continue. What's interesting, one is the fact that you haven't got to sales director doing the same roles. They've all got to your role taking different pathways. You're moving through the chessboard in all these different ways. And we'll come on to your ambition going forward in terms of where you see yourself. But what's interesting too is that no one has actually said they all want to do the same role next either. There's a real variety, which again is that mindset of openness and gathering those experiences for the backpack.
Do you know, Mike, one of my you think about your own concerns and fears and anxiety that we all have. We've all got that little voice in our head that talk to us. There's nothing worse, I think, than turning up to a role going, goodness, do I really have the experience and capability to be able to do that?
Yeah.
Now, I try to use a bit of a lens. If I'm sort of a 50-50, I'll go, okay, I've probably just got enough now that I can now take this role and learn and grow and live with it. But there's nothing worse, I think, than having aspirations, but you then put yourself in a role where you fail, and you fail badly because you're just out of your league in regards to the capability. I think what's been really important for me also is we talk about growth versus fixed mindset.
Yeah.
I've got a very strong growth mindset. I'm all about learning and growing and the continuation of that. And I think it's going to be something in me for my whole life, and the fact of wanting to know more. And for me, it's about making a difference. So it's not just about going into a role to gain the experience. It's actually going into the role to gain and to make a difference. Make a difference to the team you're working with, make a difference to the commercial performance of the business, and hopefully making a difference to the overall business unit in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm not there just to tick the box as on my chessboard. I'm there to make a difference.
Yeah, good. We've asked each of our sales directors, Chris, about the move from working at an operational level to becoming strategic. How did that happen for you?
Yeah. My Unilever days are actually really important for this. Unilever play the long game, so you have to be able to take yourself out of the tactical day to day and think more about that long term. So when we're talking about that short, medium, and long term position, you don't have an option. You have to be able to stretch yourself forward into the longer horizons. I got to tell you, it was tough. I found it really hard because I'd been successful at being quite tactical and action orientated and doing things in the now. So I think that when you challenge yourself to look further out, you then get the ability to be able to navigate where you want to go and how you want to do it, and ultimately how you want to take the business as well.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. Your first sales director role was to lead the Frucor Suntory business in New Zealand. Now, that's a home turf for Frucor. It's therefore I can only assume that's a big role with high expectations within your organization. How did you feel when you got that role, and how did you prepare yourself for it?
Excited, anxious, nervous.
Yeah.
So many emotions going through me, so many unknowns. If I just think about my personal life at the moment, I often talk about my rocks, my two girls, so Kylie, my wife, and my daughter Sienna. And I'm really clear that my rocks are what provide my work-life balance, and I'm living our life with them. So I want to make sure that I'm experiencing all of that together. So New Zealand was an opportunity for us in regards to how do we manage this whole work-life dynamic. And for me, I'm going to be the father that was with Sienna growing up, not reflecting back after 15 years thinking I was wrapped up in my career. So I've been very, very conscious around work-life balance. So by nature of that, the opportunity for New Zealand turned up, and we're like, let's go do it. Let's just have a crack. And Kylie was giving up her job after 18 years. Sienna was 8 years of age and the only grandchild to my in-laws, so taking her away. And we were building our dream home at the time. So you can imagine all the emotions going through us. And then I was this Aussie guy turning up to the New Zealand business, which was the mothership, 70-year-old business, and who's this Aussie guy coming to run that?
Yeah.
So what it made me feel all these different emotions, but how did I go about it? I really set out to seek to understand with a seek to understand mindset, but also to understand the environment I was in. So I spent lots of time with the team on the ground, lots of time with our business managers, lots of time with our customers, asking opinions, perspectives, views. Where weren't we trading well and why? Where were the things we were missing? So really that seek to understand, and then I turned that into a 60-day plan. And the 60-day plan was really important to be able to outline my little model around strategy, culture, performance. But I think the key element of this was actually to bring my key talent into the fray. And I really made sure that our key talent were a critical element of our transformation plan for the business, and ensuring that each one of them had a key role to play with the various initiatives. So everybody has skin in the game, and we then all push together as one.
And is the New Zealand marketplace very different from Australia?
I think there are some cultural nuances, definitely. The Kiwis are quite a calm, conservative community, and the marketplace is very respectful. So that's not saying the Aussie market's not respectful, but they really spend a lot of time on relationships. I think with a population we'll call circa 5 million, there are limited jobs in FMCG. So it's really sort of jobs for life in a way. And they spend a lot of time nurturing relationships and having key relationships. And you don't see the movements of career like you do in the Aussie marketplace. So, 25 plus million people, you have more opportunity, you have more organisations to be able to work with, where New Zealand you don't. So relationships actually play a key part in the Kiwi market. And stability, consistency, credibility, integrity are all critical elements of that.
Yeah, I lived there for a couple of years, Chris, and when I moved there, someone said to me, the first thing you'll notice is that everybody will return your phone calls. They are so polite. People will meet you, they'll be happy to spend time with you, but you'll have to spend time building a relationship before they're prepared to do business with you. Would you recommend Aussies look to New Zealand as a place to go to gather experience from a work perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. They're very analytical. So they're very, very clear on the commercial performance and all the indicators required to run a business. They're very thorough. They're very sequenced. They're very well planned, and they're actually quite organised in how they go about it. I think by nature, with the community being quite calm and balanced, nothing is all about today. Everything's about the future. So although there's a an action orientation to them, it takes longer than you find in the Aussie market. So there's an instantaneous requirement in the Australian market where the Kiwis are happy to sort of bit of a slow build. They'll get there, but they're very methodical and very calm in how they go about it.
Right. And I just we were chatting before we started the session that when you came back to Australia during COVID, in the middle of COVID, what was that experience like?
So I was still running the Kiwi business in March, and I was about to do my handover to the new replacement, and it was crazy times. There was so much stimulus coming at us in the first sort of 2 weeks, and we really had to get ourselves together to understand how we're going to manage the business, and certainly how to manage our team on the ground. Not knowing what the virus was doing, and how you manage things like PPE and personal distancing and so forth. It was tough times, but great leadership times. So it really was an amazing experience. And then having to run the Australian business for a period of time via Blue Jeans, then going through quarantine, and then finally landing back on home soil. It was a crazy 2020, and everyone's going to have their own story for 2020.
Yeah.
But again, I'll come back to it. The rocks in my life were really important.
Yeah.
We came together as a family, and we worked through it as a family.
Yeah.
And that was really important.
Yeah, and you quarantined as a family.
Yes, we did. We did. Which, by the way, I had a good experience. I know there's really, there's lots of stuff in the media about bad experiences, but we were fortunate. We had a couple of bed sort of apartments with a balcony, so we were okay.
It was all right. Yeah. Excellent. All of the sales directors we've had on the Incubator program so far have really impressed me with the thought and effort they put into career planning, and the group of supporters or mentors, a combination of both that they've gathered around them. So what I find interesting with so many, in my experience, positive sales directorial role models in terms of career planning, why do you think so few appraisals, reviews, development conversations, therefore with future leaders, aren't as productive as they could be?
It's a good one. First and foremost, you need to be hungry to own your own career.
Yeah.
I have had an IDP, so an individual development plan in play for the last 20 plus years.
Right.
And that IDP has actually navigated my career. It's navigated me to get the experiences I'm after. And what, by nature of having an IDP in play, is that you end up in an environment where you are written about, you're spoken about, you're thought about when it comes to talent matrix, it comes to succession planning, because you're on the radar, because you are hungry to drive your career. Generally, for individuals who are built that way, their careers go places. And I think the key message in this one is that if you think that an organisation is going to tap you on the shoulder out of the blue and offer you a job, if you don't have this hunger, if you don't have this IDP, then I suggest you're going to be waiting a fair time to get that job. So it's really, really important to have an IDP. Sales director roles are really busy, and you need to be conscious of the time that sales directors have. And I would always say it's really important to connect, turn up with your IDP, get time in their diaries, and then be clear to talk about what you're working on and what you're learning. It's important to have a balance of talking about what's succeeding for you and then what's not, and how you're going about it. And there's a lot about self-awareness in that, as we know in business, not everything works, and there are going to be the bad times as well. So you've got to be able to talk about how you manage them and how you deal with them.
Yeah. So it's about owning it as an individual, not expecting it to happen. Do you, as you've moved through your career, that IDP, is that something you've evolved, become quite personal to you? Does it involve kind of just all of life goals, or is it very work orientated?
Yeah, good question. I can tell you now, I wouldn't be here today without it. It constantly evolves in regards to my chessboard, and it is something that has been critical, I think, around my line management conversations.
Right.
So to have your line manager connected to it on a monthly basis, on a quarterly basis, depending how hungry you are with it, you need to be able to evolve with it. But without it, I just don't believe your career is going to move forward. I think
Yeah.
you're going to be sort of situated in a frustrated position, not really knowing what to do. Where if you have your own vision and mindset for it, and you're articulating it well to people, you'll progress forward.
Great, I love that. I think it's again, building on the theme, it's about being proactive with that plan, and the more you can bring that to life and build a narrative and bring people into that narrative, then, as you say, the more you're going to be talked about and thought about in more ways than just the performance that you're contributing in that exact role in the moment, but more broadly. Great. Who are your mentors, Chris, and do they help you with career conversations and decisions?
Yes, they do. And I suppose just to build on your last question too around, has an IDP also governed some of my personal views?
Yeah.
I think by nature, I'm pretty action orientated, and my wife, Kylie, and certainly my daughter, Sienna, is as well. So by nature of that environment professionally, you do take it into your personal life as well.
Okay.
So then you have your own goals and ambitions around, building houses, having holidays, doing the various things you need to do and you want to do in your life. So it's a bit of a frame of mind that you do take into your personal life as well. So mentoring actually can come across both professionally and personally. And I'm a big fan of mentoring. I think it's really important. And I think the reason why mentors are important is they need to tell you the things you don't want to hear.
Okay.
But so many mentors want to tell you the things that you're good at. They want to pump your tires up. They want to tell you how good you are. I actually don't want that. I want the other way. I want the mentor to tell me, actually, Chris, from an IQ perspective, this is not working for you. Or from an EQ perspective, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? Have you thought about the impact on your team? Have you thought about the impact on your peers? So, a bit of a plug for our previous CEO, Jonathan Moss. He's been absolutely critical for my career and very valuable in being a supporter. But he's been that guy. He's been that guy to tell me the things I didn't want to hear and to challenge me to think differently and challenge me to, change my behaviours, change how I view some things. And he had a wonderful phrase, and that was, it's a Viking with a mother's heart. And I never forget that. And that was his view of mentoring, is that you've got to have this bit of a hard facade, but you've got this bit of softness behind you.
Yeah.
But you're not doing the right thing by the individual if all you're doing is pumping their tires up.
Viking with a mother's heart.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Quite cool, eh?
I love that. It's interesting because as somebody who has a lot of quite intimate conversations in terms of career, at moments when individuals are really thinking about the next step, my role is to help guide and influence good decisions. Sometimes I can be frustrated when the individual I'm counseling is listening only to the stuff they want to hear, and the big decision or the tough decision is actually to face into the stuff they don't want to hear, and that can really influence decisions. I think sometimes if you're hearing tough feedback, then you're getting it for a reason, so actually perhaps tone down the volume on all the tire pump stuff and listen into the stuff that might be harder to hear, because that could potentially improve your decision making as a result.
Yeah, I think you absolutely need an openness and a level of vulnerability to do with that as well, because I think in the sales sector, there's quite a bit of bravado. You're turning up, you're trying to strike the deal, you're the negotiator.
Yeah.
But vulnerability is actually, I think, an integral part of what's making your capability as a leader, and your openness to change and openness to self-reflect and then actually change your behaviours as you go.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell me about the from a feedback perspective, in this same theme then, Chris, what's the most challenging piece of feedback that you've received personally?
There was one which was a catalyst for my career, and I just joined Frucor actually, and I was fresh out of Unilever, and it's fair to say I was this commercial machine. I was all about the performance of the business. I was all about delivering those KPIs. You know what? I was a terrible people manager. And that's my reflection at the time. I was not good at all. I didn't really appreciate nor respect the importance of people leadership. And I was not self-reflective. I was not vulnerable. And it was probably week 3 in Frucor, and a senior marketeer grabbed me. And obviously we didn't really know each other. But she had the courage. She had the courage to grab me and said, "Chris, I need to tell you this." And there were a number of expletives used about my behaviour and what she thought of me, which was a little bit confronting. But when I got through the emotion and started to actually unpack it, she talked about how I was treating people, how I was not a team player, and ultimately that if I was serious about a career, and certainly a career within Frucor, then I need to really rethink how I approached it. So I remember I was absolutely floored. I'd never had that type of feedback ever. And I, to this day, I'm so thankful and respectful of the courage that she showed. And I suppose it probably talks to, never underestimate the impact you have on others. And that impact she had on me is, I sat in the car that way on the way home that night, and I unpacked it, and I was just recalling the words in my mind that she shared with me. So I woke up the next morning and said, right, I've got to do something about this. So I grabbed her and I said, look, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Now tell me, give me your opinion and views. What do I need to do differently? And that story is, I'm 13 and a half years later. I'm still with Frucor. I learned so much from Unilever around the customer, the consumer, the category, all that type of stuff. But Frucor has clearly taught me about people leadership. Yeah. And that's the combination of what I am today.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, Chris. More broadly, who inspires you?
This might sound a bit odd, but my daughter, she's now 12, she's going on 13. She's my greatest achievement in my life, undeniably the greatest achievement in my life. Her thirst for life is really, really infectious. The questions and challenge that she gives me is, she has me on my toes all the time. She has me thinking about things that I probably have never thought about. And, I jump on Google pretty quickly and go, what could that answer be? She's a lateral thinker. She's always looking for different problems and how to solve them and coming up with different ideas. And she just inspires me around the way her mind works and her creativity. I'm not as creative as her at all, so I don't quite know where she gets it from. And Kylie and I talk about it all the time, that she has this level of creativity. She's super tech savvy. Okay. So, albeit you might debate whether TikTok's a good or bad thing, she's all over TikTok and personal and private. But it's fantastic. But the most important thing for me out of all this is that she's just a great human, and that's why she inspires me. Just the way she brings people together at such a young age is really inspiring for me.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. So, what's next in your career, Chris? And do you have a longer term career goal in mind?
I do, mate. My IDP is clearly still at play. So Caroline's coming back to the Frucor business on the 19th of this month after her maternity leave. So I'll spend a couple of weeks handing over to her, and I do have my next job lined up, which will become actually official to the organisation tomorrow. Okay. As the timing has landed. So I continue to navigate. I continue to put myself in positions of getting broader experience and growth, and that'll make itself clear tomorrow.
Wow, so we can almost watch this space then. Great. And for Caroline, for those of you who haven't sat in all the programs, it was part of the session maybe 3-4 interviews ago, which is on the recording, so you can jump back in, and that's a fascinating watch and listen. Quick question in from the chat, actually, Chris. How important is networking to your kind of present situation and future career?
Yeah, there's a balance here. There's a balance internally and externally. I think there's no doubt externally, you need to know the key decision makers. You need to understand who is driving the key roles in the various retailers. So a connection with those individuals is important. You need to be seen, you need to be present, and they need to understand what you're bringing to the game as such. But don't underestimate the importance of networking enterprise-wide within your organisation. Okay. It's really easy to stay wrapped up in your own division. So if you're working in marketing, working in sales, it's easy to stay within your own home as such. My challenge would be actually to be able to get yourself outside that, to understand who are the key players in supply, who are the key players in finance. Make yourself visible, make yourself connected. So networking, critical.
Great. Leads us into the next section, which is all around advice. And we've got around about 350 NAMs, business managers, category managers now on this either on the call or listening to the podcast recording. So really pleased with how well the sessions are landing. What advice would you give them about building their own career plan, their own IDP?
Understand the end game. I spoke about 40 years. 40 years is a marathon, not a sprint. Is a career. We need to be looking further out than the next 2 years. Lots of conversations I have is, over the next 2 years, I want to be here, or I want to be there. I'm like, well, where do I want to be in the next 10? Plot it for me and give me the stepping stones to get there. You need to be realistic with your career timings. I think, Mike, you probably experienced it, the frustrations of people believing they've delivered in role after 18 months or 2 years. That might work in some cases, but not all the cases. So I think be realistic. Continue to build your capability. Continue to build your competency at various things. We've all got those things in us that say, oh, you know what, I don't really know a lot about that. The day you turn around and go, I'm going to lean into that and understand more, is the day you breadth your capability and your skill set. So, I think gaining experience through different times and different time periods is important. So different jobs will give you different experiences through seasonalities and through times of change. So that's important. And I think from a personal perspective is never, ever give up. Keep that resilience, believe in yourself, keep thinking about the growth you're getting, reframe yourself where appropriate. I think that's important because you have to evolve as an individual. So by evolving, you need to be able to continue to reframe yourself and to reposition yourself as you go. And then finally, reflect on what's working and work on what's not.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of bringing that to life, one of the things that I really enjoy when I meet a candidate, or I meet candidates who are actively looking for roles, or those who are just looking to sense check their progress in terms of their career. But the really exciting conversations are those who have built a narrative around their career plan, around that IDP. And it feels to me that they've locked in some commitment as well to doing that. How does somebody go about that, building the story and actually, so it's no more than just a story. They've got milestones that mean that they're going to stick to it.
Yeah.
And there may be some flex in that, but there's points of measurement along the way.
Yeah, I probably like a broken record. I'll come back to an IDP.
Yeah.
That is a document that actually allows you to plot it, but also it allows you to capture what you've done over a sustained period of time and your development and growth over that period of time. Your line manager is absolutely critical in all of this.
Yeah.
I think we've all been in cases where we think we're better than our line manager, and potentially our behaviour might demonstrate that. I'd actually say to you that, we've got to be careful because we generally leak the truth. But your line manager is really important in regards to your career development, because you want to be able to share the vision with them. You want to be able to share how you're going to get there and ask for their advice, because remembering they're the ones who are going to be writing or talking about you behind the scenes in the talent matrix or succession planning session. So you need to be lined up with them, but then you need the commitment from them that they're going to do that for you. And if you don't have their commitment, then you've got to ask some more questions of why, because you may have missed something yourself in the process. But without your line manager, you do not get to the next step.
Okay, great. And watch that you don't leak the truth. That's really an interesting phrase. But I've talked about McKinsey's T model career throughout this program, and people who meet me, I often use it as a model to help people understand how they can progress their career, where you have the functional specialization and the experiential breadth that make up the T. The idea is around ensuring that you gather enough broadening experiences so your career doesn't get stuck, which we started out talking about in this session. But you've done lots of broadening roles as your career has gone on, as have all the sales directors we've met. Notably, your last one is sales director in New Zealand. Do you still think in those terms as you reach senior leadership? And do you still see broadening roles and experiences in your future?
Yeah, definitely. What I say here is collaboration is becoming more and more important. Actually, it's probably always been really important, but I think my journey is that recognizing the importance of collaboration and doing it across your own department is one thing, but the ability to be able to do that across total enterprise is another. And this is where I want to go next. So I think, enterprise-wide leadership is really exciting. It's a place which is going to stretch me and allow me to continue that growth as a leader and to continue my own development.
There's a hint for those of you who are thinking about what Chris is going to do next, guys. Announcement to come. I know a lot of people are reticent to take on broadening roles. I think the fear being that it might slow them down or compromise their earnings in the short term, which I completely get. If you're in the formative stage of your career, the every dollar is more important almost at that stage. So I do understand that. But for those who are thinking in that kind of frame of mind, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, it's first and foremost, it's a very personal decision. Income for your family and for your life is something that you have to be able to think about and manage and navigate accordingly. I'll come back to it. It's a marathon, not a sprint. It's 40 years of working. It's 40 years of the ability to increase your breadth of experience and to leave a legacy. So I often talk about what legacy you're leaving in that role that you're doing. The last thing you want to do is turn up to a role where you fail miserably because you've not had that experience. So again, I'll come back to it. Breadth of experience, breadth of different roles, knowing how different experiences and situations create behavior in yourself, and then how you deal with that is important. Be patient. Make sure you've got enough under your belt before you start to challenge yourself to go the next step. And, get the experiences in there, get the skills, build your career, but most importantly, do it because you love it. Don't do it because you're ticking the box. And that's probably something that I really want to talk about today, is that I think if you're doing a job just to tick the box in the chessboard, is you've actually missed the whole opportunity.
Yeah.
The opportunity is actually to experience the role, to feel the role, and to move in and out of the good and bad times, and then move with the behaviour that goes with that. So box ticking exercises I don't think work personally for careers. So
and I completely get that. I think that's really important. It's not just hey, I've done this, therefore I'm ready. That doesn't show much maturity or respect for the experience that you've had at all. In practical terms, what broadening roles or experiences do you think are beneficial and should people be thinking about in terms of their career? So, for instance, they're a national account manager and they're looking at going upwards. Often that next level up, that kind of business manager roles, the position people get stuck in. So to avoid that, what are the kind of broadening roles that they should be thinking of?
Yeah, I'll come back to IQ and EQ. There are lots of super smart commercial people in FMCG, and that is all about the IQ element. But people leadership or man management is just so critical in all of this. Yeah. And that's an experience which is going to allow you to blend your IQ and your EQ to be the complete leader.
Yeah.
And everyone's different. And I think if you think about people management, everyone's got stuff going on behind the scenes. Everyone's got their own personal challenges or professional challenges, and you need to be able to understand that and connect with that, and then appreciate how that team is going to operate because of those various challenges. Whereas a leader, you need to be able to continue to push the business forward, but you only push it forward with your team. I'm not a leader without a team. So people leadership would be one of the most important experiences to get into and to gain in being a total leader. Yeah. You need to be able to maintain the engagement of your team between the good and the bad times. So I remember my time as an MBM, and I was managing smaller teams, and then I purposely actually came backwards in my career to manage a large people team. And it taught me so much, the team at the coalface and what they deal with on a day-to-day basis, because everyone is so different.
Yeah.
Again, lots of fantastic, smart commercial people. People leadership, though, is absolutely critical for your bigger leadership roles.
Yeah, good point. I like what you said there in terms of hierarchically, perhaps that role you described, looking after a state, wasn't necessarily an upward step in the organizational chart, but it was about investing the time in your career and your experience to ensure that you weren't going to get stuck. that you're building that experience, so you could then take on bigger roles and be competitive for bigger roles going forward. Which takes me to a question in the chat from Nigel Carson. Hey Burgon, great to hear the analogy of chess related to business. How do you best outcompete in an increasingly competitive world to deliver on your IDP?
Yeah. So your ability to connect with the senior leaders in the organisation is actually really important. But I'll talk about connection being in a genuine sense.
Yeah.
And that genuine desire and drive that you own that IDP and that IDP is realistic, and you're then having the relevant people connected to that IDP. Just because you turn up with an IDP tomorrow doesn't guarantee you still have to be able to work it.
Yeah.
You have to be able to nurture it, and you have to be able to connect people to it. I think, Nige, obviously we've worked together over a number of years, mate. It's, I think from an IDP perspective, is that unless you've got the key people connected to that IDP and supporting you, so go back to my little mentoring conversation that you've got to have your supporters in the organisation to push that forward for you. It's not just a piece of paper, it's how you mould and shape the individuals with that.
Yeah, great. Okay. No matter how good the plan is, whether it's the IDP or just life plan, things don't always work out the way you hope for. What advice would you give somebody who's at that point of perhaps frustration, things aren't working out the way they expected?
Probably the first one is a bit of self-reflection. So actually understand what's driving the frustration and how you or we got into this situation is probably the first question I'd ask myself. Then to manage your own expectations in regards to timing or where you think you need to be at this point in time. You might need to reframe yourself. I often talk about being above the line versus below the line, and being above the line around looking for solutions or looking for options rather than being the victim is actually really important in regards to this one. You've got to ask more questions. And then there's the old saying that, has it got you or have you got it? Because so many times the situation's got you and it drags you down, but the question is, have you got it? And how do you get control of the situation and get control of your own emotions in regards to that? Again, your line manager is really important to give you perspective on this one. There's been a number of times in my career that I've had my own story in my head, and it's my story. And then when I share my story, my line manager's going, "Oh, Chris, I don't even know why you're thinking that way. Why are you thinking that way? Let me tell you how I see it." So I think that the constant checking in with your line manager of how they're seeing things, getting their perspectives, asking for their opinion, but also sharing the story in your head so they can either validate or give you a different perspective on it.
Great, fantastic. Just briefly on recruitment, and often it's one of those moments in time where whether internally or externally you're going for a role that you do a lot of self-reflection, a lot of kind of thinking about. These are the moments that either you move forward or otherwise with a role. You'll have sat on the recruiting side of the table a lot, Chris. When you're doing that, what impresses you about a candidate that you're interviewing, and what can frustrate you?
I think start with the impress. Is an individual who actually knows what makes themselves tick, who has self-reflection, who has an understanding of self. They have a level of self-awareness. They know their development areas. They know their strengths and their shadows, and the positives and negatives, and they're able to articulate that. It's important that they're able to articulate their learnings along their journey and how they've got to where they are today. And then what drives them for the role? Why do they want to join the organisation? And what will they bring to the game? Because generally, with recruitment, I'm not looking for the same person that I had before. I'm looking for someone who's actually going to bring something different, who's actually going to change the game for us, who's actually going to raise the bar for us. So I'm looking for that individual who's going to be able to impress me how they actually articulate their journey and story.
Yeah.
From a frustrates, it's actually individuals who are over optimistic about their career and timings, and many a conversation that individual says to me, "Oh, look, I expect to be in this role by this date." Well, a red flag goes up for me straight away in regards to that, because they're yet to even join the organisation or join that role and to really be able to demonstrate their capability and their ability to drive that business. So I'm not saying I don't like ambition. I love ambition as an individual. I'm saying that if you're putting tight timelines on yourself with your career, then I think behaviourally you'll start to show that.
Yeah.
How you manage your peers, how you manage your line manager, how you manage people in the organisation. So there's certain things that you'll start to leak because you'll be on such a mission to get to that next job. I've seen lots of individuals fail in the organisation because they think they're bigger than the organisation. And you need to really think about how do you drive your career forward, but at the same time you need to be a team player. So if you think you're going head to head with your peers all the time in this competitive nature, it is so obvious, it's so clear. True leaders are competitive. True leaders are driving for change, but they're doing that in a team environment as a team player. And that individual by nature will stand out anyway because they're doing it in a cohesive manner.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think the danger with focusing on only the next role and seeing yourself in competition for that role, it just eliminates the other potential roles you could be looking at. Because if you see it from the perspective of the organisation, you're an asset to be having a return on, and the better return on an individual is going to come from that person who's prepared to contribute more broadly to the business as their career progresses, as opposed to is this role then that role, if not that role, I'm out. And I get that too often, and that's my big red flag as well. So I'm completely with you there. We're more questions in the chat and some pre-prepared questions that have come in from participants of the program too, Chris. But before we jump into those, to finish up in the formal part of the session, what 3 pieces of advice would you give an aspiring sales director?
The first one is to be curious. And that is, why do things work the way they do? What are the interdependencies? You want to be able to pull back the layers and understand how it all joins itself together, and how either from a cross-department or total enterprise element, it comes together. Keep asking the why question and keep just drilling to that the next level. Secondly is to be hungry. Hungry is really important here. You need to be able to set the vision for your team or department, but you need to be able to look for the opportunities and solutions as well. There's going to be many a challenge you face along the way, but how you take that that strategy into action is actually really important here. I've seen so many great strategies that have been written, but they're just not executed. And if Phil Lovell's listening, the old saying of 1 point for a strategy, 9 points for execution, I think is a really nice way of thinking about this, because a lot of individuals, they pride themselves on writing this beautiful strategy. The PowerPoint presentation might look great. It might have been a fantastic delivery to the XCOM, but unless you're able to actually take that strategy and turn it into action, it actually doesn't mean anything. Because the whole idea of a strategy is making decisions on the things you're probably not going to do, and then what you're going to drive through the organisation. And then, I think finally, you've got to be pragmatic. You've got to be able to balance the good with the bad. And I use a bit of a 3x3 approach, and that is, with any review or update I'm giving, I talk about the 3 things that are working that I'm happy with, and I talk about the 3 things that I'm not happy with, that aren't working well, that we need to work on. So the ability to be able to not just turn up and go, everything's great and everything's fine and we're firing, and not have the balance of things that are going bad, because we know the business is grey. There's things that don't work, and you've got to be open enough to talk about that.
Brilliant. Okay, let's crack on with some of the open questions. So what is the first thing you do when you suffer a setback, when you're just saying things don't always work out? So how do you cope with that?
The first question to myself is why. So what role have I played in this? Am I responsible? So that's about that. I think if you come back to that vulnerability, that humility, I'm not looking for someone to blame. I'm questioning myself. How did I lead through this situation or circumstance? Where did it fail? Where did we go wrong? And then, what did I miss or what did I drop? And then naturally, I then seek to understand and look for solutions to remedy the situation.
Okay. From Amanda, if you have passion about a project, but it does not move forward within the business, how do you let it go? and move forward, or how do you pivot? Or do you pivot?
First question is, why has it not moved forward? Who are the stakeholders who have actually put their name to the project, who have been supporting you on that journey? That would be the question I'd ask first: is why has it not moved forward, and is it something that's either in your control or out of your control? If it's out of your control, then it makes it a bit tougher, and you probably then need to let it go. But if it's actually still within your control, you then need to be saying to yourself, right, what do I need to do differently? How do I reframe it to continue to push it through? I think that's where the pivoting side starts with, is that once you know your stakeholders are connected to it and they're actually backing the project, you can repivot yourself. But numerous times in my career, I've been going down a path thinking that I've got the key stakeholders lined up, but I don't.
Right.
Only to end up that I end up in a cul-de-sac or hit a brick wall and understand that why did this happen? So Amanda, I'd really be asking the stakeholders the question of why do you think the project's not moving forward, and do you need to do something differently to either reframe it or repivot?
Great. Chris, what's your view on the importance of category management and FMCG, and having experience in a category development type role with in terms of career development?
Yeah, it's important. As I said previously, the environment's become more sophisticated. It's more data driven. So it's the need has ramped up in this area for better quality category managers to provide greater insights. Category is another component of the backpack. You fill the backpack, it gives you great analytical skills. It gives you the ability to understand trends, consumer movement, behavior, all the various category indicators that come with that job. And it's interesting enough, you'll use lots of those analytical skills in your larger leadership jobs, because when you go looking for problems of a commercial nature, you want to be able to start to drill quite quickly analytically, so you never lose that experience or skill set. The best category managers that I've worked with and I've seen are the ones that are actually able to tell the story. There's nothing worse than you turn up and the category manager just tells you the data that you're already reading on the slide. I'm not interested in that, because I can read it. I can work that out myself. What I want to know is the story that's coming off the back of that, and how do you turn those insights into action, and then how do you provide the options or ideas of changing course to resolve the problem.
Okay, great. Probably time for one more question. I'm conscious it's potentially a big question, so I might chunk it up. But what do you feel are the key defining attributes or behaviors needed by a sales director versus a business manager, say? Now, the question goes on to talk about other levels too, but we differentiate those two first of all.
Yeah. Being a team player is number one. It's actually not about you as an individual. It's actually about you coming together and working as a team and providing solutions, ideas, perspectives as a team player, so you actually win together as one. And the second one is the organisation is bigger than you. That's the fact. So you need to work with it. You need to be able to navigate it. So don't fight it. The ability to navigate the grey. There is no doubt lots of people are made up of business should be black and white. It's not. You need to be able to navigate the grey and find solutions where potentially you don't know what the answers are at that time. Clear openness for feedback and development. The ability to demonstrate vulnerability is really important, to call it out when you've got it wrong, and actually to be able to share those stories where it's not working for you. Navigation of time periods, short, medium and long term, and that is being able to demonstrate the leadership of strategy, culture and performance across those multiple timeframes. Too many upcoming leaders get caught in the short tactical. You need to be able to stretch yourself out of that. And the final one is to be open to change.
Right.
We do work in fast-moving consumer goods, so by nature of that, we're constantly on the go, constantly changing, because the consumer is constantly changing. So we need to be able to adapt and move with that.
Great. We're almost done, but there is one more question come to the chat, which I quite like, so I'm going to ask this from Mark. As someone who hires, Chris, what skills do you think people with experiences in smaller businesses bring to the table versus larger businesses?
Yeah, it's a super question. Mark, I was very fortunate coming from the big Unilever, the big corporate, 100-year organisation, to join Frucor, which was a really small organisation at the time. So what do you need? Well, entrepreneurial spirit, there's no doubt. You need to be able to be thinking broader. You need to be able to bring agility. and that is that, you know, process is important. I'm actually quite a strong process guy, and anyone who's worked with me, I'll talk about cadence and rigor and the importance of the continuity of the systems are important. But you want to be able to bring a hunger. So, you know, people who have had small business experience actually know what it's like to have to take the garbage out, to turn the lights off at night, to be able to have to refill the paper of the, you know, of the printer. So all those type of things is they generally think more holistic around business. And what you'll find is you go from a small business to a larger business, you can at times feel quite pigeonholed because you've been more of a generalist, because you don't have a lot of people, so you tend to carry more burden and carry more things to do in small businesses. But certainly you'll succeed in a large business because you'll bring a very different view, because you have more of a rounded view than being sort of stuck in your groove in a big corporate.
Fantastic, great. Chris, thanks. I think that's us at 9. So I appreciate you. I did appreciate your time and you know, sharing the journey. And I look a lot of real kind of authentic stories today, which is exactly what I want to bring to this program. And it just gives us a really good insight into another pathway, another way of doing it. You know, and you've done it differently to every other sales director who's done it differently to you, and yeah. That's one of the big points I want to make. Guys, I hope you're now feeling another few percent better prepared, particularly to think about your career. Chris's point and his IDP, and that's been a 20-year plan, which constantly evolves and you know, he links back to his personal life as well. I think is excellent. We've got 5 more sales directors lined up to take us through to Christmas. Next up on October 22nd is Peter White, who's sales director at Campari. We're also launching the marketing director Incubator on October 29th, which is the same program but for marketers. Now, for those of you who are marketing curious or that's almost like an interesting way of putting it, but or who have done marketing roles or looking at marketing as part of their career journey going forward, feel free to jump onto that, and the promotions and comms and links to register for that will be coming out in the next week or so. So we'd love to see some of you guys on that session. But finally, thanks again, Chris. That was awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us, and have a great Thursday, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks.
Cheers. Bye, team.